Well, hello, Duncan Wood. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, Jeremy.
We're here at the 21st Annual La Jolla Energy Conference and delighted to have Duncan Wood, who is a professor at ITAM, a senior associate at CSIS, and also with the Wilson Center in Washington, D.C. Duncan is speaking here at the La Jolla Conference about Mexico's election and energy policy and what some of the issues we might be looking at in the coming election, but more importantly in the next presidency in Mexico. Duncan, let's start with what is the outlook and what's it looking like ahead of the July 1 election in Mexico for the candidates?
Well, you never actually want to call an election until the votes are all in, but it looks pretty clear-cut so far.
Mm-hmm.
Enrique Peña Nieto of the PRI holds a more or less 20-point lead over his nearest rivals, Josefina Vázquez Mota of the PAN and Andrés Manuel López Obrador of the PRD, who are both stuck around the between 20 and 24% mark. Peña Nieto is up in the low 40s. Mm-hmm. And it looks as though there is not going to be much change on that. I expect some narrowing before the election, but I think that it's going to be a pretty big victory for the PRI.
So he's held that 20-point or so lead, it seems like forever. I mean, this has been pretty much. So, what about undecideds? What's the number there?
There's a large number of undecideds, and nobody can quite work out what they're going to do, if anything.
Yeah.
In recent weeks, some of the polling has suggested that a significant percentage of the undecideds, maybe even totaling 5% of the vote, has gone over to the PRD, to Andrés Manuel López Obrador. But what I expect is going to happen is going to be a low level of participation in the election. I think a lot of people will just choose not to vote. Those people who do vote, it seems as though they will distribute themselves more or less evenly between the three main candidates. We do have the added complication of a fourth candidate this time around, who's been very successful, Gabriel Cuadri de la Torre, who seemed to be, irrelevant up until about a few weeks ago.
Well, the debate, he seemed like...
And then the first debate, he sprung forward, and he's gone up from 1% to around 5% in some of the polls, which is intriguing. And so he's beginning to have an influence on the nature of the campaign in terms of the issues that are out there.
Very interesting, very interesting. Well, let's move ahead. And I know you say we don't ever want to call an election before it happens. I think U.S. networks know something about that in 2000. But let's go ahead for the sake of our chat this afternoon and say that Enrique Peña Nieto is the next president of Mexico. What does that mean for energy and energy policy?
Well, I think it's significant for energy policy because Peña Nieto, like all of the candidates, has identified energy as one of the priorities for the economy. And he's been more outspoken than most on what he sees as his plans for the future of the national oil company, Pemex. He believes very firmly that it's time to change the regulatory and legal framework in Mexico, to give Pemex a lot more freedom, to increase private participation in the sector, however that's defined. We're not talking about privatization, but private participation. Sure. We're talking about an opening of the sector to some degree. We're talking about giving Pemex a great deal more flexibility in terms of how it spends its money. One of the debates that's going on right now in the campaign is how do we get Pemex off the national budget so that it is the one that makes its decisions on investment, etc. And how do we allow Pemex to keep more of the money that it generates rather than transferring it all to the state? So all of these are the issues that are up in the air right now, in addition to big questions about how Mexico develops its shale gas sector. A number of major questions about the electricity sector with regards to transmission, for example, and very importantly, from the political point of view, pricing of electricity and power in Mexico.
Mexico pays a lot of money in subsidies, don't
There's heavy subsidization for the residential sector, heavy subsidies, incredible subsidies for the agricultural sector in terms of water pumping. But industry pays a relatively high rate, and that's seen as one of the factors that's been holding back Mexican competitiveness in recent years, and has driven private industry to get electricity directly from private suppliers. But we're going to see moves on that, I think, to try to shake up the electricity sector to make it more competitive.
It's interesting because I think what most of us are looking at in the Peña Nieto presidency is what's he going to do with Pemex. But it's interesting some points you're making about electric issues. And Let me, just a final sort of question or something to talk about here. We've talked a lot here at the La Jolla Conference and other settings about what happened in Brazil when Brazil opened up its oil sector and Fernando Henrique Cardoso came in. One of the things Cardoso did is before he even assumed office, he had a energy reform package ready to go amongst as part of a broader package of fiscal and other issues, and submitted all of that within a couple of months of assuming office. Is that something that might happen in Mexico when Peña Nieto, if and when Peña Nieto wins?
Assuming a pre-victory, the new president would take over at the beginning of December. My guess is that early in the new year in 2013, a presidential initiative will be presented to Congress. But we won't see a quick turnaround on that. The Mexican way, the Mexican political way, is very much to discuss these things. There'll be a national debate that will begin, bring in all of the major stakeholders, in particular the political parties, to guarantee that this proposal will have support in Congress when it's voted upon. And particularly because we're probably going to be looking at a constitutional reform. And a constitutional reform is going to require 2/3 majority in Congress. And that's going to be tough to get. The PRI is likely to win a majority in Congress in this election, but it won't have the supermajority needed to make constitutional change. So it's going to need the cooperation of the PAN and maybe the PRD, but probably just the PAN. And one of the big questions that we have right now is to see how will the PAN react to defeat in the July elections? Will they be willing to cooperate with the PRI? So my feeling is that we'll see an initiative early on, but that initiative is going to be modified through the process of debate and negotiation with Mexico's major political actors, so that maybe by the summertime we have something that looks like a comprehensive reform package. Whether that gets voted on before the summer, or whether there's a special session during the summer, or whether it's finally presented in the fall, remains to be seen.
Obviously, the summer 1 year on, so summer.
Absolutely, summer of 2013. But what is good news is that perhaps by the end of 2013, we actually do have a meaningful change in Mexico's oil and gas sector.
You heard it here first. 1 year, we'll have a meaningful change. Duncan, thanks so much. Great to have you here in La Jolla.
Cheers.